Okay, Salam Ravi. Thank you for inviting us to do a short interview on your life and about your experience with Sai Baba. So before we get into it, I would like to know about your spiritual background before you come to know Sai Baba.
Loving Sai Ram Gulab, really appreciate you taking the time to have this sharing and discussion with me. I suppose I come from Sri Lanka. I was born in a family of 5 boys and a sister, and in my young days I had no spiritual inclination at all. But one of the things that I did experience when I was young was the highs and lows of life in several aspects. It started off with my father, who you see pictures here. He was a mayor of Colombo. He was one of the strongest men in the East, and he was at the height of his career when I was born. And then when I was just 6 years old, on a Good Friday, my father suddenly died of a heart attack. And suddenly my mother, who was only 31 at that time, was widowed with 6 children. And the eldest was 9 and the youngest was 3. And I was in the middle with my twin brother who was 6. And overnight we realized that things had changed dramatically. And it was a real miracle that how my mother sacrificed to bring us up all in private schools. And then subsequently, when I was growing up, and I was a bit of an athlete, and I was winning public schools records when I was 13, 14, 15 years old. And I remember one public schools, my mother, after my father's death, hardly left the house. She took a long time to get over the tragedy. And I pleaded with her to come and watch me running one public schools, and she came. And on that day, I had broken the public school's record in the semi-finals, but while running the finals, I tore my hamstring very badly, and I had to be carried away in a stretcher. And my mother refused to come and see me running ever again. But from then on, I found that I was having major challenges with my athletics. And that frustrated me and affected my studies as well, because I kept challenging God and saying, look, why is this happening to me? Why are you punishing me? Because I want to train, and I could never train for 2 weeks in succession. And this went on for about 3-4 years. And there was a time I then left school to focus on athletics, because a friend of mine, or colleague of mine who was senior to me, had just come back from the 1972 Munich Olympics. And he said, Ravi, how come I don't see you taking part in some of these athletic meets? And I told him about my injuries, and he said, look, come and train with me. And in 1974 there was going to be the Tehran Asian Games, and I'm confident that you'll be part of that team and will go up and do well. So at that point I was doing my A-levels at school. I decided to leave and focus 1 year on my athletics. During this time my mother also enrolled me to do accountancy, and so I was doing that outside of school. And while I was training for the Asian Games and everything seems to be going well, I went for the trials, the final trials, where they would select the team. And
Which city was this?
This was in Colombo, and this was 1974, April. And I pulled my hamstring again while I was running in the trials. So from then I decided to pack up my athletics and focus on my studies. And in 1975, January, I took off to England. I was very grateful. I had a twin brother who had just gone to Norway, and I was 20, he was 20. He sponsored me to go to England to continue with my higher education, where I went and spent 6 years in the UK. And I'd qualified, and I was working in the UK to gain my practical experience, and I'd come back to Sri Lanka in '79 to get married. My wife Kalyani joined me, and in 1981, having got my qualification, my heart was still in Sri Lanka. And I felt, despite there was offers for me to stay on in the UK, I always wanted to return back to Sri Lanka. I loved my home country, and I came back, and I was very fortunate that I was able to join a British company called Two Tolls, who are very big in the UK in the textile and sewing thread business. And I was their chief accountant and company secretary, and things were going really well. My eldest son was born in 1981. I'd returned in February 81. And unfortunately in 1983, at the height of my career there, we had the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka. And overnight, everything was turned upside down again. And we were very fortunate to flee Sri Lanka a week later. And all we had between us, my wife, my son was only 2 years old then, with my in-laws, all I had was a kit bag when we left the country. We ended up in Chennai. Thankfully, a friend of my in-laws opened their home and gave us shelter. And then for a year, it was probably the most difficult time in my life. And but I'll come back to an incident that happened there, that just to show that divinity is always with us.
How long you stayed in Chennai?
We were there from July 1983 till June 1984, so 11 months. I was frustrated because we were only given one visa for 1 week at a time. And particularly for me, they thought that I was going to stay there permanently and look for employment. And so, which I was not interested. I wanted to, go elsewhere. And then the opportunity came to apply for to Australia, and they were taking accountants, which was my qualification, and so I was confident they will, take me. There was no reason that they would refuse my application. But the process is very slow when you apply in India, because it's a large population. And so I had about 3-4 letters from them, which was very encouraging, saying that I had all the right paperwork. Remembering that I had left everything behind, I had to salvage some of these records. By miracle, I got them back. And then, because every day I will wake up in the morning and say, what am I going to do with today? Because I was going a bit crazy, not knowing what to do with my life. And so I talked with Kalyani and I said, look, let me go to Delhi, to Indian High Commission, to the Australian High Commission, and find out what's happening with my paperwork. I felt that the last stage was what I was waiting for, just for an interview and to be approved. So we agreed that I go to Delhi, and I took a train, went to Delhi for a week, and I turned up on Monday morning at the Australian High Commission. And this, if you enter the foyer, the front office, there was about 50 people lined up already, waiting to see the immigration officer or the. So I waited for my turn. You just line up. There's no seating. You just line up. You stand up. And eventually my turn came, and I explained to this person that I'd come there because my application was pending and I was getting a weekly extension, and it was getting a bit frustrating. Could she give me an update as to what was going on? And she was very nice. She said, I'll go and get your file and come. And then she looked at my file, opened it, and then said, I'm very sorry to tell you, but the Australian government has just stopped taking accountants, so we cannot process your applications any further. I was devastated because I'd pinned all my hope for 11 months, hoping that this would come through. I had no idea what I would do. It was like I was my lowest point on that particular day. Anyway, I asked her if I could speak to the High Commissioner, and she said, no, you can't do that. You've got to go through us. I said, sorry, there must be a mistake. She said, I'm sorry, this is how it works. We can't proceed with it. So I came out of that High Commission feeling so low. I didn't know what to do. I felt I couldn't go back and tell my wife, look, this is gone and I have to go. I didn't know what to do. In New Delhi, all the High Commissions are generally around then, so not knowing what to do, I just went to the British High Commission, the American High Commission, the Canadian High Commission, picked up application forms, and then I realized, oh my God, I'll have to go through this whole process again. I had my heart was not set in going to any of these countries, really. I'd lived in the UK, it wasn't sort of my cup of tea. But I came back that evening, and I was staying with an acquaintance that I'd met in Chennai, in this apartments. This is a high-rise in flats, about the 8th or 9th floor. And I remember we had dinner, and then I came out to the balcony. It was about 7:30 in the evening. I looked up into the sky, and I had never really, prayed. I've done some prayers during my athletics days just so that I can pass during a competition or during exam times. But this time, a heartfelt prayer, saying something like this. And I said, God, I really don't know whether you exist, but if you do, you need to help me, because I have nobody else. I really don't know what to do. Can you show me a way? Can you help me out of this crisis? And then I went to sleep.
So this was any God? Or
no, I just looked into the sky, and I just said, God, if you exist, you must help me. I have nobody else to. And then when I went to sleep and I woke up in the morning, all I could hear was the word Zambia, Zambia, Zambia. Now, in the UK, when I got my first job, a friend of mine, a Sri Lankan friend who happened to be an accountant for this company, approached me and said, Ravi, I'm going away for 6 weeks on a holiday. Would you like to come and get some work experience? And I was desperate to get work experience, because when I was in the UK, they stamped me on my passport that I could not get paid or unpaid work as a student. And I was desperate. So I went, and so through that process, I eventually got a permanent job. And then this gentleman, this accountant, when he came back from his holiday, took an appointment in Zambia, and he moved to Zambia because at that time Zambia was doing extremely well. The copper industry was doing well, a lot of demand for accountants, and I knew he had gone, but I had given it some thought. But when I woke up in this morning, the only word that was sort of coming through my head was Zambia, Zambia, Zambia. I woke up, had a quick shower, ran downstairs, caught an auto rickshaw, and I told the guy, take me to the Zambian High Commission. I had no idea whether there was a Zambian High Commission in Delhi. I turn up at the Zambian High Commission, and I enter the building, and I see about 50 people seated in the front foyer. And I saw a lady standing at the back behind a desk. So I approached her, and I said, Madam, have you got any Zambian newspapers? And she said, why? I said, I explained my situation. I said, I'm an accountant. I've fled Sri Lanka due to the ethnic conflict, and I'm desperately seeking to see if I can find any jobs that I can apply to go in Zambia. She said, I'm very sorry, we do not keep any newspapers. I said, what about any journals or magazines that you may have? She said, I'm so sorry. But I was desperate at this stage, and I said, Madam, is there anybody else I can speak to, please? I really need some help, because I know Zambia do take accountants. So she went and called her supervisor, a very inspiring looking lady, immaculately dressed. She came and she said, what's your problem? So I repeated my story again, my desperation, and I said, look, I'm desperately looking to see if I can find any vacancies for jobs in Zambia that you have. She said, well, this lady has just explained to you that we don't keep any such information. I'm sorry, we can't help you. I said, lady, I'm desperate. I need to find some information. Please help me. Then she looked at me and said, you see all these people sitting in this room? They've all come here because there's a small team that has come from Zambia to recruit accountants. They're here for today and tomorrow, but unfortunately all the interviews are full up. because we got 50 people today, 50 people tomorrow, and they're only applying for about 3 vacancies. So I'm sorry, we can't help you. I said, Madam, please give me a chance. She said, well, they're also going to Colombo after this interview to do some interviewing there. Why don't you go back to Sri Lanka and get an interview there? I said, how can I go back to Sri Lanka? I've fled Sri Lanka and come with virtually nothing. Please give me this chance. She said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And I did then something that I'd never done before. I put my hands together and I said, Madam, I beg you. I please beg you to give me a chance. I said, do one thing. Here's my CV. Just give it to them and ask them whether they would like to see me. That's all I'm asking you. I beg you. She was taken back at my plea. So she took it while everybody else was wondering what's going on here. And I stood there. And then a few minutes later, a Zambian came out and said, please come tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I will see you. And I was just grateful that somebody was happy to at least talk to me, listen to me, have a chat to me. So I came back the next morning, and there was all these people again, the room was full. And I was called in at 9 o'clock. And I went into this office, there was 3 Zambians sitting. And they had a friendly chat to me for about 3-4 minutes. And then they said, when can you start? I said, yesterday. And it was like, and they said, look, Ravi, we have not offered a job to anybody at this stage. You're the only one. You go now and come back in the afternoon around 2 o'clock to fill out all the paperwork for work permit. I just couldn't believe my theft. And I remember that prayer that I had made. But I walked out, and then it took another 3-4 months for the paperwork to be processed. But eventually, my wife and my young boy, we left to Zambia. We were there for a year. And then
You left from Delhi?
We came back to Chennai,
Yeah.
and then flew out from Chennai. It took about 3 months for the paperwork to be processed. Then I knew when I went to Zambia that Zambia was not the country that people talked of. There was a lot of corruption, bribery, there was a whole lot of stories. So after a year, I was offered a job in Botswana. So I went for 2 years there. And then in Botswana, our work permits were only given for 2 years at a time. So at the end of the second year, when it was coming up for renewal, which was not a problem, I was doing quite well as a financial controller, we were heard about opportunities in New Zealand. And at that time, my wife said, why don't you go and take a look, what could happen. I was reluctant because I was very comfortable in Botswana. I was doing quite well, and things are picking up. But long-term future with children would be a problem because you never get citizenship, and higher education could be an issue. So I told my boss, and I said, look, Terry, would you mind? I'll take a couple of weeks off, and I'm going to Wellington, and just to see if there are any opportunities. But I promised him that if I did get an offer, that I'd give him at least 3 months notice to find a replacement, because it's not easy to find a replacement. So I did that. I came in March 1987 to Wellington. I knew nobody.
So you came on your own?
I came on my own. A friend of a friend met me at the airport and put me in a motel, and I just walked to all the employment agents, gave my CV, had a chat, and 3 days later I had 2 interviews lined up, one with a company called Feltex, another one was with BP Oil. And on Friday I had 2 job offers. The Feltex job was a better job.
That's the carpet company?
That was a carpet company, but I didn't know a lot about them. BP Oil was an international company, but they gave me a job which was not a very senior position, just an accountant role, but I felt that was a more solid company.
So what company you worked in Zambia?
They were private, they were parastatal companies. They were called AFE, African Farming Equipment. Zambia's got a big holding company called Zimco, which had about 40 companies under them. They were called parastatal, semi-government owned. But unfortunately there was incredible corruption, and I'll have some amusing stories about it at another time. But at least I was very grateful because it gave me a chance to recover from the setbacks. And at that stage I was not mature, I didn't have the spiritual maturity to understand there was a reason for everything. But I was very bitter about what had happened in Sri Lanka. I was very bitter, extremely bitter, because I'd left UK to go back, and here I was a refugee virtually. But I was very grateful to Zambia and then Botswana, because I was able to, get back my life together in some form or shape. So eventually when I had this job with BP, I took the job, but I said that I would accept only in one basis, that I would come back only in 3 months' time. Would they prepare to hold my job? Because usually people are not prepared. They want somebody very quickly. But I was very fortunate. They said, look, you come back. When you come back, there'll be a job for you. We're not sure which accounting role, but there'll be a job for you. And at that time it was very interesting. When I went to the New Zealand immigration office and I gave them the job offer, they stamped me permanent residency immediately, over the counter. And they gave me a paper and said, here's the paperwork for citizenship which you can apply in a year's time. Then I told them, look, I have to go back and give my notice and then bring my family back. So they said, well, you've got to reapply everything. And so that's how it happened. And I came to New Zealand eventually, end of June 1987. And I'm working with BP. Life is going well. My second child was born. So when we came to New Zealand, interesting, my oldest boy was 5. My second boy was 9 months old. And for my eldest boy, this was the 5th country at the age of 5. He was born in Sri Lanka, lived in India for a year, Zambia, Botswana, and now New Zealand. But we were settling down quite well.
So where about in Wellington? Which suburb?
In Johnsonville. It's very funny because we were staying in a motel for the first month with these 2 kids. And we were trying to rent a place. And we found it extremely difficult to find a rented accommodation because people were reluctant to give for families with young children. That was the kind of culture at that time. So I had to buy my own house, and I thought, well, I had no savings. I'd used all my money for moving to New Zealand. I'd only worked for a few years. I didn't, have a lot of savings. So whatever savings I had used to travel and to ship my goods and so forth. And you won't believe the interest rate for lending in 1987 was 23%.
Jeez. So
even though I had a decent job, to get a loan was extremely hard. So I was wanting to buy a house, and the loans were very expensive. But my elder brother, who was a doctor in the UK at that time, said, Ravi, I got a friend of mine who has asked me to invest money in the UK. It's a doctor friend of ours from Sri Lanka. He said, look, the interest rates are quite low in the UK. I'm happy to lend you some money from the UK at a slightly higher rate, but a lot lower than what you would pay in New Zealand. That was something like 10% interest. And I said, wow. So I borrowed money from him. I took a small loan in New Zealand. And I bought the first house I saw. I was so naive about it, but I was so grateful to get a house. It was a very modest house, but at least we had a home. And life was continuing. But you won't believe, a month after I bought the house, September 1997, there was the famous Black September. There was a share market crash, and suddenly the whole New Zealand dollar weakened. Property prices collapsed, and within a month of me buying the property, my debt had already increased well above what I had borrowed. So my brother was very gracious. He said, look, you don't have to repay anything now. Just hold on for a while until, we need the money. So this continued for a couple of years, which brings you to my next chapter in my life, the most significant chapter, which is to do with how I came to Swami. Because up to now, I was still trying to live a little bit of my expatriate life in Africa. I would come every day, enjoy my scotch, my brandy, I have my food, play my cricket.
So not going to any temples?
No religious at all. I'd forgotten all that prayer that I had done back in 1984. All that stuff was, you could say I hardly prayed. I had no inclination towards anything that was religious.
How about Kalyanam? Did she have
At that stage, not a lot. I mean, she grew up in a very orthodox family, but because her upbringing was also, she had spent a lot of time overseas as a young child in the UK and then in convent schools in India. Not religious as such, but very much into the values and so forth. So here we were bringing up two children. I think accidentally in Johnsonville, one day she bumped into one of our now known, well-known side friends called Daya Naresh Prasad. And they were just living at the bottom of the hill where we were. And she had mentioned, look, I run a thing called SSC classes. Would you like to send your boy? At that time, Naveen, my eldest son, would have been about 6 or 7. And so she came and said, look, they're conducting some human value classes and would you like to send your boy? I said,
what year was this?
This was 1989, 89, 90, yeah, something like that. And so I said, okay, it's better. He's not going for any religious classes. If it's human values, it must be good. Let him go for it. So he would go, and I remember on Saturday afternoons, I had started a BP cricket team and I was captaining. Saturday afternoons we would have our games, and Saturday afternoons would be his SSC class at Daya's house. So on my way to cricket, I would go drop him and then go for my game. And I remember on one occasion, this would have been the 89 Swami's birthday, and I was not a devotee. I went to drop him. And Naresh, Daya's husband, said, this evening we're having Sai Baba's birthday program, would you come? I said, please, excuse me, I'm not into all these things. And I continued with my cricket. So he was going, but I had no involvement. Next year, 1990, just prior to Easter, a very tragic incident happened, just very significant. As I said, I was one of the senior accountants at BP. Now, and usually we have our month-end deadlines and so forth. And I was working one evening, and I noticed something very unusual. As you know, BP is a very large company. We had, and one floor, the 7th floor was entirely, 6th floor, I think, the entire, only an accounts department. And we had a finance manager who was a wonderful guy, but he strictly worked 8:30 to 5. He'd come sharp 8:30 and he'd leave sharp 5 o'clock. But he expected all of us to work and get our job done. And I noticed as I was working, it was about 6 o'clock in the evening, I thought, I heard, his office was right opposite mine on the 6th floor. And I could hear laughter coming from his office. And I thought, that's unusual. Ken is still here. It's 6 o'clock. What's going on? So I asked one of my colleagues, I said, David, what's going on? Ken is still in his office. He said, yeah, his eldest son, he's got one son, eldest in the family, 3 children. He was only 18 years old. He had just started his first semester in the Canterbury University. And he was coming for his vacation, and he was in a happy mood. He's having a drink with a couple of other colleagues from BP. He's just happy he's having a drink. Oh, I said, that's unusual. And I continued to work. And about 15 minutes later, actually, this finance manager walked into my office with a can of beer, Foster Lager. Yeah. And he said, Ravi, would you like a drink? And I said, not tonight, this evening, Ken, thank you. And I continued with my work. And when I left office around 7:30 in the evening, he was still in his office having a great time. Yeah. I went home. And the next morning, I came in quite early to work. I think by about 6:30 I was in the office.
That's quite early, huh?
Yeah, I used to come in early when there was work. I sat, and just as I started work, this other colleague of mine, David, came to my office and said, did you hear what happened to Ken's son? I said, what happened? See, last night, he and his best friend were driving from Christchurch to Picton to get the ferry to Wellington. At 1 o'clock in the morning, they were hit by a big truck, and both his son and his best friend were killed on the spot. I was shocked when I heard this news. I said, my God, Ken was so happy last evening. He was so excited, so looking forward to this child. I met this son on a couple of occasions. Such a beautiful boy. And I thought, my God, Ken was going to be shattered. And as I was sort of trying to process this information, about 10 minutes later, the same accounting colleague of mine came and said, Ravi, did you hear what happened to Tina? I said, now Tina Cooper was a 23-year-old cashier working in the accounting department. I said, what happened to Tina? He said, well, she was just crossing the road, coming into work, and she's been hit by a car.
Oh.
And I said, what, is she dead? She said, no, they rushed her to the hospital. That same afternoon, Tina died too. So you can imagine the mood in BP on that day. Not 2 young people, but 3 young people, 2 people that we knew had been, their lives been taken away. We hear of car accidents all the time, but for some reason, I just couldn't work at all. I just sat in my office and kept asking, why? I said, look, if this had happened to one of my children, I would have been destroyed. And I said, look, we came to New Zealand for the future of our children. And I suddenly realized, everything that you dreamt and what you work for, all your aspirations, all your goals can be destroyed in a flash. Nobody knew what our destiny was. But I kept challenging. I wanted to know why. I needed an answer. And I can tell you, I did not work that whole week. I just sat in my office, looking out of the window we had a view of the Wellington Sea, beautiful. And I kept saying, why? Just like back in 1984 when I was challenging God, if you exist, show me an answer. And a week later, I had a cousin of mine, you may know, his name was Logan Arden. He was in Palmerston North. They were Sai devotees, he and his wife. And in fact, they would come to Wellington very often to attend some Sai programs. And occasionally he would say, we're attending like an EHP program and things. And he said, come and you want to attend? And I would say, excuse me. So this time when I visited him with my family for the weekend, after lunch, his wife Jayanti said, we have a video, those days there was no DVD, a video called Aura of Divinity on Sai Baba. Would you like to watch? My wife said, yes, she would like to watch it. I said, look, I'm not interested. And I moved out to the kitchen area while they sat and watched Aura of Divinity. But I could hear the conversation that was taking place on this video while I was in the kitchen. And Sai Baba was giving a discourse and Professor Kasturi was translating it. And suddenly I found that the answers that I was seeking for my questions was being answered through this discourse. And without me realizing, I came and sat and started to watch the rest of the interview, including Hislop coming on and talking about the cross that Swami had materialized and so forth. And I was suddenly, fascinated with this conversation. I was intrigued. So much so, as soon as we get back to Wellington, I left my family and I took off to visit. You may know Kumareswaran and Sivajini in Wellington. Sivajini's father, I knew, was a Sai devotee in Wellington. That time they was living in Lower Hutt. Yeah. I used to love the company of older people for some reason, and I was very fond of him. I went straight to his house and I said, Uncle, I know you're a Sai devotee. Do you have any literature on Sai Baba that I can read? I want to have some understanding on his teachings. He said, Thambi, I have a series of Satya Sai Speak books. I'll give you volume 1. If you like it, you take it and you read it. And if you want more, then you come back and I'll give you. So I said, thank you. And I took this Satya Sai Speak volume 1. I come home. I went to the bedroom. My wife is an avid reader. She reads a lot. I hardly read. If I read books, it was either on sports, on cricket. I loved my cricket, and or something to do with my work. So here she was reading, and I opened up Satya Sai volume 1, and I read the first discourse. As you may know, it's called Manasa Bhajare Guru Charanam. I read this discourse, and something really connected in my heart. And again I felt all the questions that I was seeking were being in a way answered. And particularly if you go back to that first discourse, and at the very end of the discourse there's a little quotation of Swami. It said, every desire leads to another. Every bond brings 10 other. This is the nature of human happiness. But satisfaction from such human desires are temporary, impermanent, and imperfect. And I suddenly realized that the attachment was the cause of all suffering and misery. So the question, somewhere in my mind I realized that if I could only become detached, then perhaps I could overcome the suffering and misery in life. Now, as I was processing this information, something said I have to try something to test to see if this teaching was valid. So I turned to my wife, and the first thing I said was, look, Sai Baba is going to be my master. I'm going to take him as my master. She was a bit surprised because she didn't know what was going on through my mind. And then I said to her, for the next 3 weeks, I'm going to give up all alcohol and I'm going to be a vegetarian. I'm going to give up all non-vegetarian food.
That's quite quick.
For the next 3 weeks. She said, you're crazy, what's going on? But I had, for some reason, I may have read somewhere that if you try something for 3 weeks, it may become a habit. But I wanted to see, because I was very fond of my drinks and my non-vegetarian food. So I wanted to see whether through this I could become detached, because I really wanted to, something told me that if you can be detached, you will not be affected by things in your life. And all I can say is, since that day, I had never touched alcohol or non-vegetarian food. I had never even had the slightest craving for it. So that was the coming of how Swami called us, and it was His grace that this happened. And then, of course, I then took the first step to go to a Sai center, which was in Wellington. And I owe a lot to them because they embraced us.
He says the Lahore Center.
There was the Wellington Sai Center.
Wellington Sai Center.
And there was my first inspirational figure in the Sai Center was Major Purushothaman. I don't know whether you met him. He was from Singapore originally. He was a retired army major, and he had come to New Zealand temporarily. But he was a very gifted man. He had the most, to date, the most incredible musician, singer, and he was also an astrologer, which I'll come back to you. Very inspirational, because I'd never done any singing. I was a bathroom singer. I used to love as a young boy, one of my passions was to sing Tamil songs from movies, but I never trained or anything like that. So you go to the center and you get your first exposure of people singing bhajan, which was a strange experience for me. I'd never been to a bhajan in my life. And I saw all these people clapping and shaking their bodies and all that, and I thought, this is so strange. But funny enough, there was a Kiwi guy, I forget his name, I think it was Dave Broughton, I think he was a journalist, was the only Kiwi man, and he was singing Manasa Bhajare Guru Charana. So And they announced bhajan practice on Sunday mornings. And but I hadn't listened to any bhajans until one day my cousin's daughter gave me a bhajan tape, a Sundaram bhajan tape, and I listened to this song, Shambho, Shiva Shambho, and I really appealed to me. And so anyway, this Manasa Bhajare Guru Chanam was going through my head. And they said bhajan practice Sunday morning. I had this fear of turning up to a bhajan. I wanted to sing a bhajan. The only thing I heard was Dave singing. Anyway, after 2-3 weeks, I plucked up courage, and the practice was at Major Purushottam's house. And I turned up on a Sunday morning, and I find there's nobody there for practice. That's just me. And Major said, we call him Major. He said, come. I said, is there bhajan practice? He said, no, they cancelled bhajan practice. I said, then I'm going. He said, no, since you've come, you might as well practice. What would you like to practice? I said, Manasa bhajan. Okay, he said, you sing. And as soon as I started, he said, stop. You're singing like Dave. That is the Kiwi way of singing Manasa bhajan. And he was so loving and patient, and he said, this is the way to sing, this is your pitch and all that, and I had no clue. So he introduced me to bhajan singing, and slowly, that's how the involvement with the Sai Center came through. This was going on for about a year, and suddenly, when you're new to Baba, you're reading, and you suddenly, there's a complete shift in your life, the way you see life, and your priorities change, and so many things. You're sitting at work and you're thinking about all these things that you're reading. And people talk about Sai Baba, his miracles and all that. But, apart from me becoming a vegetarian and giving up my alcohol, I'm not had any kind of miracles or anything. But then a dramatic event took place. I just checked the date with my friend Kumareswaran, because what happened was, again, I had taken my family to Palmerston North for the weekend. I love my Sri Lankan food, and they were good cooks, his wife, and so I go. And then Kumareswaran lost his mother in Botswana. The date was 30th of May 1991. So I've been going to the Sai Center for about a year. So he said, we are having a bhajan for my mother in Lower Hutt, and he asked me to come to sing a bhajan. So I left the family in Palmerston North, drove back to Lower Hutt, attended the bhajan, went back to my home in Johnsonville to spend the night, and then next morning, 8 o'clock, Sunday morning, I drove back to Palmerston North. As I started the journey, Wellington, when you have a beautiful sunny day, you can't beat Wellington. There was no wind, there was no traffic Sunday morning. And the Wellington Sai Center had borrowed a cassette tape on the Gayatri Mantra. And even though I had it with me for a few weeks, I hadn't listened to it yet. So I thought, okay, I'm driving now, I'll put this cassette tape and enjoy listening to it. And here you are driving on a Sunday morning, and Baba gives his discourse on the significance of the Gayatri Mantra. And I was listening to it very intensely, rewinding, listening to every single word. The whole discourse was about 30-35 minutes, but because I was rewinding and listening, it probably took me about a best part of an hour or so. And I was feeling really, the vibration was so good. I was feeling so good about myself. I felt a kind of peace in me that I'd never felt before in my life. And just at the end of the tape, just as I finished listening to this tape, I don't know if you know, when you drive from Wellington, you pass Levin and all that, and you come to a kind of a turn to Palmerston North. It's 30 minutes, the last final 30 minutes. As I took that bend, a man stopped me for a ride. And generally I would never stop for any, particularly a stranger, to give a ride, because there's been a few incidents even in New Zealand where people had been kidnapped and so forth. So, but because I was feeling so good now within myself, I stopped. And then the door opened and a guy put his head in and said, "Could you give me a ride to Palmerston North?" And I said, "Yes, get in." And once he got in, and then I realized when I looked at him, if I describe him, he had the face of a young Jesus. His hair was nicely flowing. He looked in his late 20s. But then he was smelling of alcohol. He was wearing a dirty raincoat. I saw a tattoo on his hand. And he was bleeding. He had some blood coming out of his forehead. And then something in me said, I should be having him in the car. But yet, there was a part of me very calm and peaceful. I said, just to have a conversation, I said, "Where are you coming from?" And he said, "Well, I had this big fight with my wife, and this time I've decided to leave her for good. So I'm going to Palmerston." I said, "Look, are you sure about this? I can take you back." He said, "No, I'm coming from Living. I've walked all this way." I said, "I'll take you back. It's not my nature to take these guys back, but I was feeling so good about it. I said, I'll take you back." He said, no, I left her for good this time. Please take me to Palmerston North." So, okay, we're driving. I had like most of us do, I was given a photograph of Sai Baba just a few weeks earlier by Dr. Sarapavan actually. He had come to Wellington and he gave a talk and he was giving out these photographs. So I had this photograph, which was in the car. This man that I described to you suddenly looked at the photo and he said, "Is that Sai Baba?" Shocked that he knew Sai Baba, because at that time very few people knew about Sai Baba in New Zealand. And secondly, the type of guy I described to you, I thought wouldn't have anything to do with Sai Baba. So I said, "Yes, Sai Baba." But I didn't want to have any conversation about Sai Baba because I was very new to him and I didn't know a lot about him. So I wanted to change the topic. So I said, "Look, do you have friends in Palmerston North? Do you have somebody to take care of you?" He said, yeah, I have. But he come back to me and said, he asked me, "Have you read the Bhagavad Gita?" I hadn't read at that time. I had never read the Bhagavad Gita. I said, "No, I haven't." I said, "Have you read it?" He said, "Yes, I know everything. I've read the Bhagavad Gita." And he said, "I know everything." I said, "What do you mean you know everything? Where did you read this, the Bhagavad Gita?" He said, "Dunedin University." I thought, that's strange. I didn't know they teach Bhagavad Gita at Dunedin University. But I wanted to change the topic, you see. So I said to him, "What would you do in Palmerston North?" He said, "I will do some tattooing." Tattoos are normally associated with people who are less desirable, you see. And again, in my mind, I was thinking, should I have this guy in my car? But I was being there was a witness to it, and I was saying, okay, everything is fine. But he kept coming back to me, you see. He asked me, "What does Sai Baba teach you? What's his teaching? What are his main teachings?" he asked me. At that time, I had not read a lot on Baba's books. I just a little bit. So the first thing that came to my mind is he talks about unity of faiths. And I wanted to move the topic from Sai Baba back to change the topic. I said, "Where did you learn tattooing?" I said. He said, "In the prison." I said, "Oh my God." In my mind I said, "Michael, what's this guy doing in my car?" Right? He's been in prison, his tattoos, he's smelling of alcohol, he's had domestic issues. But there was a part of me that was calm having listened to this Gayatri mantra, the significance of it. But he came back to me and he said, "Can you explain to me what unity of faith means?" Well, the first thing I could say was, well, I suppose all the faiths talk about the universal values. They emphasize on love, on peace, on compassion, on truth, and so forth. And then I again tried to move the conversation to something else. And he talked about his tattooing and all that and his present. And then he come back to me and said, do you want me to explain to you about unity of faith? I was stunned. This man wants to, it's like this, he said. He said, imagine you're sitting on the ground. You're sitting on the ground and there's a group of people sitting around you. They're sitting and they're all looking at you, looking at your face, or looking at your head. What can they see? Imagine you're sitting on the floor, people surrounded you, looking at you intensely. What can they see? So I said, I suppose they can see different parts of my head and face. I said, exactly, he said. See, some people can see the front of your face, some people can see the left hand of your head, some people maybe the right, some of you the back of the head. They're tall enough, they may be able to see the top of your head. They're seeing different facets of your face, your head. See, unity of faith is like that. All the faiths and religions are seeing the same truth and they're explaining it in their own way. They're seeing the same facet from different angle. This is unity of faith, he said. The one truth, the one divine is being described by many as they see it. It's all valid. I was stunned by this explanation. I had read from his teachings a lot since then. I had never come across this explanation yet. And just as he explained this, and I was still, trying to take this in, this wisdom, he said, oh, we're just coming to Palmerston North. There's a sign called Welcome to Palmerston North, as he said. And by the way, this road is a kind of a very lonely road. There's no traffic, there's nothing. You're just going, I think I hardly passed any cars. He said, just pull me off and drop me off here. So I pulled up my car, and as I stood, he put his hands together and said, Namaste to me. I had never said Namaste to anybody in my life. So I said Namaste, and he got out of the car with a smile. And then I thought, you know what, I should have thanked this guy. Because he thanked me for the ride, and I should have really thanked him. But this I will promise on my mother. When I looked, there was nobody. There was nobody. It was an empty road, it was a long stretch of road, there was grass fields on either side. I could see nobody. I was stunned. So I rushed to Palmerston North, to my cousin's home, and I narrated the incident. And then when I went back to Wellington Science Centre, I said it to my friends Buchan and Kamala and all. I said, it's Baba. But all I knew was it was a divine experience and a tremendous revelation. So this happened on the exact date now is, as I look back, was the 2nd of June 1991 on a Sunday. After this experience, I suddenly realized that Sai was somehow or other having a great impact. And I told you earlier that I had bought the first house, come to New Zealand, and suddenly I was in debt. And now the interest was accumulating because I was not defaulting on my principal. So I had never asked Baba for anything up to that point. I had never asked Baba for anything. But I sat in front of my computer at home, I remember, suddenly this thought came and I said, Swami, you know what? Can you get me out of this debt? I don't need a house, but can you get me out of this debt? See, I went to work. A couple of days later, the finance manager whom I spoke about, who tragically lost his son, approached me and he said, Ravi, there's a job as financial controller for one of our subsidiary companies in Auckland. They have interviewed quite a few people, but the manager there, the general manager there, in the recommendation of the retail manager for BP, wants to meet you and talk to you about this position. I said, Ken, that means going to Auckland. I don't want to go to Auckland. I'm settled in Wellington. I don't want to prove myself. I have moved too many times in my life. You know, this is our 4th year in New Zealand. You know, I don't want to go. He said, Ravi, I understand. But they want to talk to me. At least just go for that sake and just be interviewed. That's all. You don't have to say yes. Just go for my sake, please. So very reluctantly, I flew from Wellington to Auckland, and I met the general manager. We had a conversation for 20 minutes, and he said, Ravi, will you take the job? That means shifting the entire accounts department from Auckland to Wellington and setting up a new from Wellington to Auckland and setting up a new accounts team for our subsidiary company. There was a team of 40 people.
So this is still BP?
With BP, but for because BP, as you know, they have several facets to their operation. I was looking after their commercial division, accounting, and later their retail division, the wholesale part of it. But they also had a retail side where the oil industry deregulated in 1989. Prior to that, the oil companies were not allowed to own service stations. But after deregulation, all the oil companies went and bought out a lot of service stations. They got a lot of money. And suddenly, BP owned about 180 service stations, but were losing a lot of money because suddenly the margins, all their projections went haywire, and they were losing a lot of money. So they wanted to restructure and do things differently, and they wanted to shift the accounting, which was based in Wellington, to Auckland, because the head office for the subsidiary that they'd formed to manage the retail operation was in Auckland. So remember, I had prayed to Swami to get me out of debt. What happened Sunday was, I couldn't refuse this job because they were pleading me to take this job. And BP assured me, they guaranteed me a price for the house which was above the valuation. And within a month, the house was sold. Incidentally, on the day before we left to Wellington, a person came, saw Baba's photograph, and he offered a price which was less than the valuation, but BP guaranteed me the valuation. And again, it was funny because BP did their own valuation, which was less than the private valuation that I did. And they broke all rules and they accepted my valuation, or the valuation that I had done privately. And they also paid me a disturbance allowance, which was significant. And within 1 month of my prayer, I was debt-free. So I came to Wellington, and we came, and I said, we're no more buying a house. Enough of houses, owning houses. We'll just rent a nice house.
This is in Auckland?
In Auckland. Just Half Moon Bay, which is 5 minutes drive from where I live now. We rented this beautiful house. The rent was quite expensive those days, at that time, what we were paying. But it was a big house. We had 3 levels, a huge basement. So, and then in Auckland, there was a few centers and groups. So, Kalyani and I said, well, we'll try the different groups before we settle down on a center. And eventually we went to Mount Eden Center, which was the first center in New Zealand, as I understand, or one of the oldest centers. And we would attend devotional singing program. Until Richard Wallace, who was national president, then said, oh, I hear a few people who are living in your area who want to start. Why don't you start something in your locality? So one day we got a call from another lady, and she said, look, there's 4 or 5 of us who want to have a little meeting to see whether we could start a little center here. So we met in this house. There was 6 of us. And then we said, yes, we will start something here. And I offered this basement. We had a big basement. We had 2 big rooms. We offered one of them to start. So on the 12th of December 1991, we moved to Auckland in July 1991. 12th of December 1991, we had our first opening session. And the center, the birth of Havik Pakranga Sai Center was in this humble home. And we were very fortunate because we had in 1993, Jack Hislop came. He came here for the National Convention and he came and did a beautiful sharing. And then in 1990, then
By this time you are getting
I'm
involved
getting
in
into the
center.
Sai Center,
Yeah.
but mostly we started regular study circle and bhajans, but not so much into service. Then came the 1993 National Convention in Tuakau. And our first Sai conference. We had our two boys, and we went, and Brother Jagadisan was the chief keynote speaker. And as you know, he is such a dynamic speaker. I never heard anybody speak with that kind of fervor and energy and humor and insight, and a man of great vision. And the energy was such that weekend. In fact, what we didn't realize was my wife Kalyani actually miscarried during that, But I was very happy that, we were not planning on another baby. It was, all going good. Now, while I was working in Auckland, I still had to travel to Wellington on work. And I would go very often, but I refused to stay in a hotel. I always stayed with my friend Major Purushothaman because I loved that Sai company.
Yeah.
And I would always make sure it's on a Thursday so I could attend bhajans and all that. And after bhajans, his wife Puni would lovely, host. She would have dinner, and I would have my bhajan practice. And I was hopeless, my timing was useless and all that, but Major was patiently.
So when was the first time you sang a bhajan in a center?
Oh, that was Manasa Bhajare in Wellington, yeah.
Okay.
But when I came to Auckland, I missed that bhajan practice because he was such a wonderful teacher, and he would tell me, every time I said, brother, you sing that song so beautifully, but I don't think I can sing it. He said, no, why do you say that? You can sing it. I'll teach you. And patiently, 2-3 hours, he will teach me. So when I came to Auckland, I had no teacher, so I would make sure that my bhajan practice, and I will get him to record. Even today, I have his tapes. That's what I've learned. I only sang songs that he taught me, and I would do this, and then eventually he would sleep in one couch and I would sleep in another couch, and this would continue. And because he also was an astrologer, he would say, Ravi, I'd like to leave your palm. I would say, no, please don't do this. Not that I don't believe in astrology, I don't want astrology to influence me. He kept trying his level best, I kept refusing it. Until I said we had October 93 was the conference when my wife miscarried. In January 94, I had my year-end accounts. We finished in early part of January 93, sorry. 92 was the conference, I want to correct it. 92 October was the conference. 93 January, we go to Wellington with my wife and 2 children, and we stay with Major Purushothaman. And one morning he said, I want to read Ravi's hands. I want to see. I again refused, but somehow they persuaded, and my wife was also very keen. So you won't believe, he took a photocopy of my palm and he studied it, and then he told us a few things, and he mentioned, you're going to have a 3rd child. I said, no way. No way, we have 2, that's plenty. But my wife first insisted. She said, no, I want to know, is it going to be boy, girl? He said, you're going to have a girl. I said, Major, we were supposed to have a 3rd child, but there was a miscarriage, it's gone. No more. Okay. He says, Ravi, look, I can only tell you what I see, right? I'm saying that you're going to have a 3rd child, and this will be a girl. I said, okay, I don't believe in it, but let's see. So we come back after holidays, get back to work. I think it was May 93. One day I get a call, I'm in my desk at BP. I get a call from my wife, Kalyani. She says, guess what? I'm pregnant. I hit my head on the table and I said, what? I couldn't believe it. So once I got over the initial shock, I said, okay, it's all fine, it's all babas, whatever. we were not hoping, it's his gift. So we slowly went on, and then, but what was happening was suddenly everybody around, when they heard the news, saying, oh, it's going to be a girl, it's going to be a girl. Because after 2 boys, they thought we were wanting a, because it's 7 years, you see, now, since we had the second child. And my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, was into astrology in a big way, and she was consulting all these astrologers in Sri Lanka, and she was calling and saying, oh, you're going to have a baby girl, you're going to have a baby girl. And I'm saying, it doesn't matter, whatever it is, let it be. Then, I think it was around October 93 or November, just prior to Baba's birthday in 93. I had to go to Wellington on one of my for work. I woke up one morning to get ready, and just as I come out of my shower and dressing up, Kalyani says, I had a dream of Swami. And she explained, and what she said was that we were having like a family reunion, and her father, Baba was there, and there was a line of people waiting to see Baba. And her father was also in the line. Now her father is not completely against Baba. You see, he has nothing to do with Sai Baba or religion. He's a temple man, but he doesn't like all these gurus and all this. So she was surprised to see the dad is also in the queue. So eventually, when he comes to see Baba, he says, see, I've come for my daughter's confinement, but I have to go back to Sri Lanka. Can she have the baby early? So I think Baba says it's not advisable, that's not good. But he insists and pleads, so Baba says 1 week before. I think he wanted it to like 2 weeks, and he said no, 1 week. And Baba and Kalyani saying, I'm telling my dad, don't ask. Anyway, in another part of her dream, she says that she's in the hospital, in the bed, because she said up to then she's been having some difficulty about having some dreams where she was finding it difficult to nurse the baby, because it's been a long gap and so forth, and some difficulty with, pregnancy. So in the dream, Baba comes into the hospital, opens her stomach and gives the baby in her hand, and then he sits next to her. And then she's nursing the baby, and she feels relief she can nurse the baby, and she realizes it's a boy. It's not a girl, it's a boy. And then Baba starts to give some sounds to name the child. Then Kalyani said, she told Baba, Swami, my husband and I decided that whether it's a boy or girl, we were going to name the child Sai. So he smiles and he leaves alone. So Kalyani, when she excitedly shared this dream with me, I immediately said, 1 week before Baba said she was going to be a boy. Now the date that was given by the doctors was 14th of January. 14th is a significant day in the Hindu calendar. They call it Thai Pongal in this, along with Sangrati. So when he said I calculated the date immediately, 7th of January, we're going to have a baby boy. As I said, this is around October, November 93. And 7th of January is also my eldest brother's birthday. Now, my eldest brother to date is my true role model. He is not into spirituality or anything, but I have never come across anybody who is a thorough gentleman. One who practices values in every sense. Not once in his life has he ever spoken ill of anybody. Such a wonderful person. Anyway, so I could remember the date very well. 7th of January, baby boy. So when I went to Wellington that day, finished all the work, went to the bhajan, came back to Major's home, and we were having dinner. Putni asked, how's Kalyani doing with the pregnancy, how is all that? I said, I have some news for you. We're going to have a baby boy on the 7th of January. Then Major said, no, you're having a girl. I said, no, we're having a baby boy. So this conversation went on. And you won't believe that January we were actually having a family reunion. We had, because of the problems in Sri Lanka, our families were all over the place. So Kalyani's family side was having a reunion. Her parents were coming, her sisters, her brother, they were all coming from Canada, from UK, from USA, from Australia, Sri Lanka. Now, this is interesting. Her mother and her younger sister came first, and then the father came separately. I went and picked him up at the airport. This was end of December 93. I brought him from the airport. As soon as he walked into the house, he walked up to the first level where Kalyani was, and he greeted her and he said, "Remember, you're going to have a daughter." I was standing down and I looked up and said, "No, uncle, 7th of January, we're going to have a baby boy." He said, no, girl, all the astrologers have said girl. I said, "No, baby boy." Now, I was financial controller for the subsidiary company, and our financial year was 31st of December, was the financial year end. And on the 7th, exactly 1 week we are given to finalize all the accounts and give it to the auditors, auditing. So 7th was a Friday, 94 was the last deadline for giving the accounts to the auditors. So morning, as I woke up, I turned to Kalyani and said, "How are you feeling?" She said, "It's okay, nothing big." And I said, "Whatever happens, don't be in a hurry until 5 o'clock in the evening." I said, "Okay, I have to finish the accounts, everything, and give it to the auditors, anything after that." And I went to work. You won't believe, lunchtime, Major Purushothaman rings me from Wellington. He said, "Ravi, today is 7th, right? What's happening? Any news?" I said, "So far no news, Major, but I've told Kalyani to hang on till after 5. He said, "I want to tell you something. Today is a good day. Today is a good day. But if you miss today, the next good day is not until the 12th of January. So make sure that if Kalyani doesn't deliver the baby today, first make sure it's not delivered for another 4 or 5 days." I said, "Major, what are you telling me? This is not in my control." Okay? No, you have to believe in the power of prayers and all these things. I said, "My prayer is this. Swami, whatever you give, we never ask for a baby. This is your gift to us. Whatever you give, we'll accept." No, you must pray and all this. "Anyway, keep me informed," he said. I said, "Okay, I'm hoping everything will happen later today, but not before 5, I said. So we finished the conversation, and by 4:30 itself, I finished everything, handed over to the auditor. Came home just after 5 o'clock. When I came home, I saw Kalyani and her younger sister. They were timing, with a kind of stopwatch. She was having some kind of, possibility that there's something going on. And so, but her parents had gone to the Balmoral temple, which had just opened. Being a Friday, they are, very religious and go to the temple. So, but I didn't tell about this conversation this evening, tonight. But the hospital had said that she shouldn't come until she's really ready to deliver. So she was having some kind of, pain and this thing that was going on. Then, for some reason, she decided to ring the hospital at about 7:30 in the evening and said, "Look, I'm having some sort of contraction," is that what you call it? And the whoever who spoke on the set said, "Please come, because you're having a baby after a long gap. Please come." So at least I was happy that at least we're going to the hospital. We don't know when the baby is going to be born. So Kalyani and my mother-in-law and I went with my video camera and a photo of Baba, and I took the audio tape of the chanting Sri Ram Jai Ram. They gave us a nice room. I set up the audio tape chanting Sri Ram Jai Ram and put Baba's thing, and then Kalyani was given a lovely room. You won't believe, a lady walked in, a midwife, I think. She walked in and she said, "That's Sai Baba." And again, I was kind of, a puzzled, but also very encouraged that, hey, somebody's, okay with that photograph. About an hour later, the doctor, our GP, came to see Kalyani. He said, I heard you are in a hospital, I've come to check everything is okay. Kalyani was having some pain, but he was checked up. It's getting to 9 o'clock in the night now, and I'm looking at the time, oh my God, only 3 more hours to go before it becomes 8. So as he was leaving, I asked him, Dr. Bruce, I said, Bruce, how's she doing? Is everything okay? He said, no, everything will be fine. Look, she'll be fine, don't worry about anything. When the time is ready, they will call me and I'll be here. He was thinking that I was worried that he won't be there. I said, what time do you think the baby will be born? You know, she's progressing very well. It'll be sometime in the early hours of morning, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, but don't worry, I will be here. And I thought, oh, that's it, next day, right? So he left. You won't believe, within a couple of minutes of him leaving, Kalyani suddenly started to feel the pain more intense. And suddenly they gave her oxygen and all that kind of thing. And by 9:20, she was delivering. The child was breech, and I think he had some cord around him, so there was something, they had to be very careful. And I was here, I was filming the whole thing. And as the baby came out, the nurse had and gave it to her. And she screamed, it's a boy, it's a boy, it's a boy, she screamed. And my mother-in-law was shocked. She was sitting because she thought it was going to be a girl. So that was a very, you see, people talk about what's Swami's miracle. For me, everything has been a miracle. Everything in our life has been a miracle. It's just that we don't see it that way. But this was one of the remarkable incidents that happened that, reinforced your faith inside in some way. He got me out of debt in Wellington, and he gave this kind of gift. And then, so this happened in 94, January 7th, and in May, we made our first visit to see Swami in Puttaparthi. We went with our family, small group.
Who else were in the
Oh, there were Phil Cottingham and his wife Jenny, Auntie Padma was there, Doug and Siglinda were there. A few. We didn't go as a group. We went as a family. They happened to be there. But your first anticipation is, we were very fortunate because it was in Whitefield, and we didn't know about accommodation because we made some arrangement through some friends outside. It was terrible, but we were lucky. We got the last apartment that was available. We were very fortunate with a small baby. He was only 4 months old. And that was just lovely. I never forget the first darshan you ever saw me, because it's an anticipation. And I remember you walked in to Whitefield on that stage by that Krishna statue, and he put his chair and he put his arm like this, and he stood like this for about 2 minutes. I never forget. And then he walked past where we were seated, and he smiled. And in that trip, I asked for, and I remember going on the trip, and I said, Swami, 3 things. I want to obviously have your darshan, but I also want to touch you. I want to hear you speak. So he gave Pada Namaskar, he took some letters, I saw him. The last day I was leaving, I said, Swami, you haven't spoken to me, I haven't heard your voice, At that time there was a group of Singapore devotees who had come. A beautiful group, they were dressed, the ladies were dressed beautifully in pink, and the men were in white, and they're very disciplined, as groups come. My first experience of seeing groups, how they, conduct themselves. And the first day they were taken for interview. Everybody wants interview and all that. And then when we were sitting in the Western canteen, one of the devotees who came, he was on a crutch. He has amputated one of his legs. Very nice chap. And he was telling us something from the interview, and he said, what Baba told us, he'll see us again tomorrow as well. So what? You only saw him today, seeing it. So on my last day, when I went for last darshan, they give you like a special line, and they allow you to sit they give a special seating. And I'm seated with the Singaporeans. And there's morning darshan and afternoon darshan. The previous day, they had the Swami's interview in the morning. Afternoon, they wanted to go and see Super Specialty Hospital at Puttaparthi, so they went off. They missed the afternoon darshan. And they come back for this morning darshan. So I'm sitting in this block with these Singaporeans, and Baba comes. And in my excitement, I blurt out and say, Swami, I'm leaving today. I say, Baba doesn't know, And he looked at me, he stared at me, and I thought, my God, I'm going to be burnt, So I just, froze. And then he spoke to this gentleman next to me, the chap I said had his leg amputated, lovely. He looked at him and he said, where were you all yesterday? Why didn't you come to darshan? You all went to Puttaparthi, right? Swami knows everything. I'm everywhere. I know everything. And I suddenly said, Swami, I heard your voice. And I heard you say the most important thing, that you're omnipresent. You're all-knowing. You're all-powerful. And when I said, I'm going today, Swami, I said, please give me some vibhuti. That's what I asked him. So anyway, he said all this to these people, and he didn't take the entire Singapore group. He only took this boy for interview. Asked him to go. So darshan finished, and so I went to do my last minute packing and to buy some little bits and pieces from the road. About an hour later, I went out to the street outside to buy a few gifts for people, And I saw this guy, the Singaporean, coming with the crutches, and he said, oh, brother, here's something for you Baba had given me for you. Gave me 2 packets of vibhuti. He didn't have to give me, Baba had given and he said for you. So anyway, that was our first trip. There was supposed to be 1994 summer showers, but it got cancelled last minute. But one of the beautiful things that happened was we had some contact with Professor Anil Kumar, who was then the principal for Whitefield College. And so he called us every day, the New Zealand group, the people I mentioned, to his office. And he would every day share with us what Baba has been talking to the students the previous evening. In Whitefield, after evening darshan, Swami would take all the students to his home, residence, and he will talk to them. And Anil Kumar will translate. And here Anil Kumar was sharing that. It was almost like summer showers. And I found something interesting as we walked into the room. Anil Kumar will close all the windows, doors, everything, and it was almost like in a dark room. And he will share, and I will write all the notes of everything. Even today I have all the notes that he was giving. And he said something, and I asked him, so why are you closing all this? He said, Baba is omnipresent, he knows everything. But if somebody was to go and complain that the principal of Whitefield College is talking to foreign devotees, he will pull me up. He said, hey, why are you giving scope for blame? See, you must be careful. Don't give a chance for others to find fault. But one of the first things he said, just to finish this part of the journey, Anil Kumar said, yesterday Baba asked all the students, who is Rama's best brother? Best brother. And a lot of people said, Lakshmana, Lakshmana, Lakshmana. And Baba said, no, Bharata. Bharata is the best brother. I said, why Swami? Why you say that? See, Lakshmana wanted to be near to him, but Bharata wanted to be dear to him. See, you must be near and dear to Baba, he said. He said, you see, many of you students here, you are near to me. You see my warmth, you see my light, but you don't feel the warmth, he said. My devotees in faraway countries are near and dear to me. So it's very important that you see not only the light, but you feel the warmth as well. So this was a lovely message. It's like this he gave many indulgences. We come back. As soon as I come back to New Zealand in '94, I've told everybody, don't buy a house ever again. Just rent a nice house, peaceful, no headaches, everything. The landlord came up to us and said, we are going to sell this house, you have to we have to give you one month's notice. For those days, I think they gave us a bit longer than maybe a couple of 6 weeks notice. You have to find another place. Oh, by that time, the size center is happening in our home as well. 6 weeks. So I told my Kalyani, okay, here's the budget, find a house, but make sure there is an extra room for budgets. Very important. And this is the limit. So, and I left it. I was very busy with work. And poor girl, she had the baby, she's nursing, 2 other boys, and estate agents, they'll come, they'll show you all these expensive houses with nice. I said, no, my budget is this. I don't have much savings. Because whatever money, I'm making good salary, but you're traveling overseas and doing all these things, not real. I said, this is the limit. So eventually, they come and show this house. It's an old house, but they offer the asking price is a lot high, but it has a nice little room at the back for what we can hold for budgets. So I did a crazy thing. I have only now about 2 weeks to go. I offered a ridiculously low price. The estate agent rang me at 10 o'clock in the night and he said, Ravi, what is this? They're asking 260,000, you're offering 190. Can't you make a better offer? I said 191,000. Take it or leave it. And estate agent, they'll ring you back 20 minutes later. I said, no, that's too low. Please do something better. I said, okay, I'll give you one last offer. Don't trouble me after this. 192,000, take it or leave it. And I put the phone down, not knowing where I'll go next week because I have to vacate the house. He rang me 10 minutes later and said, offer accepted. Right? So very quickly, you won't believe, brother, at that time I didn't have with 5% deposit you could buy a house. Even the 5% I didn't have, I had to scrape. A friend of mine, you know very well, Arvind, he had to lend me some money, put the 5%, and then my devotee friends helped, came, repaid the house, we carpeted, and on Ganesh Chaturthi, September 1994, we moved, had our first budget here, we moved, center was going on here, and Professor Venkatraman came here, it was going on, and you won't believe this small room that we had, 65 people would come and jam pack. Yeah. Because it was very difficult to get a venue those days for Sai Bhajans. People, the moment they said the purpose is for something spiritual or something Indian, they won't give it to you. But this was going on, we were going in this small room, and 1995, April, I had planned to have a family reunion on my side. My mother was living in America with my sister. And I have a brother in UK, a brother in Norway, a brother in Sri Lanka, another brother in States. We have not seen each other. And, we were since 83. I said, let's have a family. I promoted this idea. But suddenly in March or April we were supposed to meet. Just a few weeks before that, BP come up to me, my manager who was in Australia, came in to say, Ravi, we are doing another restructuring. We want to move you back to Wellington, to shift the entire accounting department to Wellington. I said, you're crazy, man. I moved all this, I'm stayed, my children are, my eldest son, remember, 5th country when he was 5 years old, was very upset when we moved from Wellington to Auckland. Very upset, because for the first time he's been having friends, he was in one place. So now to uproot them would be another disaster. So I said, no, I will not move. He came back to me another time, said, we can even offer you a position in Melbourne with BP. I said, in my heart, I felt, no, this would not be the right thing. So I took a trip to 95 to Wellington. A small group was going. We went, again Whitefield, and we were staying outside. I was there for 2 weeks. Every morning I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, have a shower, and I would write a letter to Baba. Whatever that came into my mind, heart, I would write to Baba. And in those I know one of them also said, Swami, you know, would like to be nice to have a family reunion and all that. And I said, Swami, you know, if you can get me out of this debt, that's also good. No, BP told me, because they offered me a job that I won't get any redundancy payment. Because BP had a redundancy for people who they made redundant. But in my case, they were offering me a job back to where I started or to Australia. So they told me that they will not pay me any cent. I said, that's okay. In my heart, I felt that's the right thing because I can't uproot my family and again. So then, he took every single letter of mine that I wrote over the 2 weeks. On different occasions. Sometimes he'll take 2 letters, 3 letters, but he took every single letter. So when I came back, and I finished with BP, I thought I can walk into another job the next day because I work for a big company and, you know, should not be a problem. But because by the time I was 40, I found that 40 was considered old now. People were reluctant to give you employment. And I was very particular. You see, when I went for interviews, I told them very clearly to the employment agents, I don't want to work for any company that produces things that are not productive or useful for the society. They said, what do you mean? I said, I don't want to work for tobacco companies, Coca-Cola, all these type of companies. I want to work for an organization. They thought I was strange, you know. But I was very... So work was not coming, so I started to do some studies. I did some exam, some papers. My wife was a bit worried because here I was virtually unemployed for the best part of 18 months. And I was also thinking, have I done the right thing to the family by leaving a good company like BP Oil? So this was going through my mind. Perhaps I'll share a...
What year was this?
This was 95. 95. I left BP in 95, so this was 96. I must tell you 2 important dreams that I had. One about how Swami revealed about the truth and his teachings, but on this particular incident, because I was worried about whether I had done the right thing. So in this dream, he was seated on the ground, and he calls me and makes me sit in front of him. And he asked me, why did you leave BP Oil? I was surprised. I said, Swami, I thought you wanted me to leave. He said, well, I want you to tell me the reasons why you made that decision. Swami, but you know the reasons. No, I want it from your mouth. Tell me why you left. So I gave him the 3 or 4 reasons that I chose to leave the company, including the kind of restructuring and uprooting people's life, my children's future, and so forth. He listened to all of it, and then he looked at me, he smiled, and he said, you did the right thing. You did the right thing, he said. And he said, you don't worry about anything, I will take care of everything. Always follow your conscience, he said. Always follow your conscience. That was a lovely dream. But I must tell you that a year before that, while I was reading Swami's teachings, you know, every morning I go to work, I've taught Baba's book, I'll read some. One of the things that always puzzled me was this thing about Atma. Because Swami always talked about, you are the Atma. You're not this body made of blood, flesh and bones. You're not this unmanifested desires. You're not the manifested mind. You're not this delusion that prevents your liberation. But you're the supreme Paramatma. If only you know your innate strength. So I was thinking, Swami, what is this Atma you're talking? I don't understand. I saw some explanation where Swami was talking, you know, Swami was saying the Atma is like the electric current. The various bulbs and electrical items, they're like the bodies, you know. The current, even if the bulb goes, the current is always there. But I still, you know, was trying to see then what is death and all these kind of things. So one night, I was reading Jack Hislop's book, My Baba and I. A beautiful book, as you know. And as I was going to bed, I saw that there was a lot of incidents where Baba would take Hislop in the car with him. And Hislop will ask him questions. And Baba would answer. So I saw this lovely interaction, and I suddenly remember asking Swami, I put the book on my chest and I said, Swami, Hislop was so lucky. If he had any doubts, he can ask you and you would explain. I have this doubt about Atma. You're not here to answer the question, I said. And what I didn't realize is I had fallen asleep with this book on my chest. And I had this very, very clear dream. Some dreams are extremely clear. And there he was seated in his chair, and I was standing, and he called me and said, you have a question to ask me. I said, yes, Swami. Ask me. Swami, I want to know about the Atma. He says, what do you know about the Atma? He asked me. You tell me what you know about the Atma. I babble something. Swami just listened to it for a little while, and then he said, he got up from his chair, he didn't say anything, he got up from his chair, he came and held me, put his arms around me tightly, he held me so tightly, and the next thing, we were both spinning on the ground. We were spinning so fast, it was like an electric current going through. It was doing a terrific speed. We were going. It was only energy I could feel. And after a while, I couldn't handle it anymore. I said, Baba, please stop, please stop, please stop. We were spinning. And then he got up, he stopped, he looked me in my eyes and he said, you see, you and I are one. That is Atma. He said, forget everything else. There is only one. You and I are one. This is Atma. So that was a beautiful dream. And then when I woke up, I realized, oh my God, I had this book, on me, and it was just this lovely, beautiful part. So these are ways that, even though Swami never personally spoke to me, I felt that every time I was 7, I had the fortune of taking the youth for the first World Youth Conference. There was 26 of us that went. And I must say a very interesting thing that happened. I remember I told you in 1995, Baba took all my letters. So I would have written at least 14 letters. Every letter he took. And Pada Namaskar about 5 times. So before I went in 97, I told people, if you want to give a letter to Baba, give it to me. I will take it. I will deliver it to him.
But this time you left BP.
I left BP, and then I had started working. I got a job with an organization called Mental Health Foundation as his financial controller. It was good. And by that time I also decided to, a friend of mine encouraged me to start my own practice. He said, Ravi, you got so much of experience doing accounting for overseeing the accounts for service stations. Why don't you specialized in that? Why don't you start? I'll help you to set it up and start working from home, looking after this account. So my former boss in BP gave me an opportunity to come and talk to some of the dealers. So a few people approached me, and suddenly I set up an office in one of the spare bedrooms, and I was doing some accounting work. Just a few clients, very small, but I was saying, it'd be nice to get a permanent, a few hours regular job as well. So I suddenly accidentally saw this advertisement for a part-time financial controller, just 25 hours a week, I think, 3 days a week. So I was offered this position, and then this was 97, probably June, 96 now, 97, yeah. And just 2 months later was the first World Youth Conference, and they very graciously gave me time off to attend this. So I'm telling people, give me letters if you want, I'll take it, I'll give it to Baba and all this. And some strange things happened, but that's for another time. But we arrived in darshan, and we're getting lovely front rows. Swami would come, he will talk to the boys, but he'll avoid me. And I've got all these letters. He will avoid me almost deliberately. This went on for about 3-4 days, and I would say that, he's just avoiding me taking this letter. And on one of those days I was in the second row, an Italian gentleman was sitting in front of me, and he had about 4 letters, 4 or 5. And Swami come up to, how Swami, when he's carrying letters, those days he would take all these letters, he had a huge amount of letters in his hand. And he come up, and when this man held his letters, he said, big bundle, and he refused to take it. And I thought, my God, if that is big bundle, I've got about 20 letters, you see. Swami is not going to take my letters at all. So I started playing with Swami. I would take 2-3 letters. Next day, if somebody is, he won't take it, then I would say, oh, my letter, so I'm being selfish. So I put some other letters. No, nothing was happening. So one afternoon, before we went for afternoon darshan, we used to meet as a group, all the youth. We talk how are things, and people will say, Swami is not looking at us, Swami is not ignoring us. So everybody was feeling dejected, disappointed, particularly the girls. The boys generally get a good darshan, and Swami would come and talk. And that's the first time I heard him say, where are you from? And when we said New Zealand, he said, no, New Zealand, not New Zealand, New Zealand. So I said to everybody, look, we have forgotten the purpose we come here for darshan. Let's forget everything. It's not about whether Swami is looking at us. It's not Swami is having our darshan. Let us have Swami darshan. Let us just go and enjoy the energy. Wherever we are seated, let's go and enjoy his darshan. We talked about it, and as I went for afternoon darshan, as I said, we used to always get first or second rows. And we got token number 1, brother, you won't believe. We got, and as I'm walking in, along with the letters, I was also carrying a videotape that was given here by the National Service Convener about service activities in New Zealand to get it blessed by Baba. I was carrying that also. Up to thou, Sevadals for allowing me to take everything. That afternoon, the Sevadal said, what are you carrying in your bag? So I said, letters and this videotape. He said, you can't take videotape. You please go and put it in the cloakroom. I felt so bad. By the time I came back, I said, Swami, not only videotape, no more even carrying letters. Tomorrow, I'm going to put all these letters, go to the post office and address it all to you, post it. I'm just going to sit and enjoy your darshan. By this time, not first row, I'm in about the 50th or 60th, in the 4th block right at the back. Swami came, I just enjoyed the darshan, not worrying about any of this. So Swami does his loop. He takes a group of people into the interview room, and when he does that, people get up and go for their tea and coffee. So I suddenly moved right to the front of the 3rd block. The students sit in the 1st block, 2nd block, a group of devotees were already there, and I was sitting in the front of the 3rd block, and I was reading Swami's discourses, a book called Kodaikanal Discourses. And I always kept a notebook in my pocket, and whenever I read something that really touches my heart, I would make a note in my diary. So I would keep. So I was something I touched, really was very inspiring. I took this notebook and I wrote how I felt or whatever I wrote. Just as I finished writing that, I saw Baba coming out of his interview room. He came and stood in front of the students. And it's beautiful to see the interaction, the play between the students and Swami. He's smiling, whispering, talking. You don't know what he's saying. And they're stealing Pada Namaskar and all that. Then he slowly came back to the block, between the 2nd and the 3rd block. And every day at that time he would talk to this father and son American devotees. He was a well-known devotee, and the son was a very tall boy. Every day, both morning and afternoon darshan, Swami would find them in the crowd and talk to them. Once he even materials vibhuti, and I heard him say that. He asked about his mother. He said his mother couldn't come to darshan, she was not well. He said, give this vibhuti and ask her to take it in water every day. So ever since that day, I also do the same thing. But anyway, this day he came, he stood in front of these 2 people and he was talking. For about 3-4 minutes he was talking. And I had these letters in my lap, and I said, okay, last chance. If Swami turns towards me, I will give it to him. Because tomorrow I'm posting it. Swami just turned, completely didn't turn towards us, just turned away and started walking away. My heart sank, because in my heart I said, Swami, these people have written to you with so much of love. Please take. By this time Swami had walked about 5 meters away. As soon as I said this, Swami, these devotees have written to you with so much of love. Please take it. The letters were only sitting on my lap. He spun around. As soon as I said it, he spun around came directly to me. I didn't even give the letters, he took all the letters. At that moment, I realized Swami is aware of every single person's thoughts. Instantly. He had been testing me for a while for my motives. He was teaching me bashing my own ego. And the moment I completely surrendered to him, he took the whole lot. And later, as I had tears in my eyes, and of darshan, I looked what I had written. I had written, Baba, please purify my heart and mind with your love. That's all I had written. And that was that expression of love that he gave. So those were beautiful moments with Swami. I mean, did I tell you by the time I bought the second house and I left BP and I was not having a job for 18 months, financial debts again here. Oh, no, sorry. After I bought the job, BP said they will not give me a redundancy. They will only, because they have offered me a job. When I came back from that 95 trip, from Baba took all my letters, my manager came from Australia and he said, Ravi, even though we offered you 2 positions and you decided not to take it, BP has decided to pay you redundancy. He didn't tell me how much. He said redundancy. The day I left BP, that was about 3 weeks after I returned from India. They gave me a check which paid out the entire mortgage for the house. I was debt free for the second time. So I made a promise to Swami at that time. I made a promise which I am still holding. I said, Swami, you got me out of debts a few times. This is a gift from you. And I will never move from this house. Even though it was an old house and we did a little bit of renovation, and many times people said come to the new developments around this area, Botany, Flatbush, I said in my heart, I made a promise to Swami, I will never leave this. This is your house. This is not my house, it's your house, your gift. I'm ever grateful to you. So we continued, and thereafter the center became bigger, and we were fortunate. We got the opportunity to move to Edgewater College, Marai, for our center. Lovely people, the Marawi people, they opened our center, hosted us there. And then, as you know, today Havik Pakaran Center is one of the largest centers in New Zealand. And but all is grace, and it's been a wonderful journey.
Good. So, Ravi, just to sum up, what do you reckon is the main message that you get from Sai Baba?
To me, I mean, his teachings are a vast ocean. And I must say that of all the activities that I've been engaged in, the most beneficial has been the study circle. We still have it here regularly on a Friday. And the biggest transformation has come from that activity. See, of all the things that we do, raising our human level of consciousness is the greatest gift that anybody can give to us. So, for me, the most important thing is that dream where Swami came and said, when he asked me why you left the company, and he made me answer, and he said, you did the right thing. And he told me, follow your conscience. And to me, he's constantly been reminding us of our own innate divinity. Our potential is the only one who sees our true potential. And it's up to us to live up to that potential and to follow your conscience. He said there is no other God. But we must have the confidence, the faith, the unshakable faith in that divinity. He said there is no difference between faith in God and faith in yourself. It means the same thing. So, the greatest change is that everything is divine. To change our way of looking at it. I think in one of the discourses he said, I give you a special mantra, not based on any deities or anything like that, but it's based on 5 letters called God is. God is. If you can go on thinking about it, reciting it, acting upon it, it is the greatest service you make to mankind. But you must have the unshakable faith in your own inherent divinity and that everything is divine. So that's a long journey, but to me, it's always be true to your conscience, because if you do that, you will automatically live the values. For some of us, it doesn't come easy. For some people, like I said to my elder brother, he doesn't have to go to a temple or pray because he just lives it. But for some of us, based on our past vasanas and tendencies, takes a while. But it's a constant reminder that divinity is omnipresent, all-knowing, all-loving and all-powerful and resides in all our hearts. We just need to have the self-confidence to manifest that inherent divinity in us. So I have a mission statement. Now, I'll just finish with this, if you may. I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Goldstein on one occasion when he was addressing a group of us. And he said, have any of you got a mission statement for your life? You all work for companies and corporations. Everybody has a mission statement. But do you have a mission statement for your personal life? And none of us had. He said, you should. It's very important. You have. So I came and I thought about it. And so the mission statement that I have for me is that I must uphold Satya, Dharma and Ahimsa. Truth, righteousness and non-violence. I must uphold that. That's my foundation. And I must radiate Shanti, Prema and Ananda to manifest my Atmic divine reality. That means you must radiate love, peace and bliss. So your foundation, you must never compromise with truth, Dharma, righteousness and Ahimsa, non-violence. Never compromise that. That's your conscience. But radiate whatever you do, dedicate to Him. And when we went in 1997 for that first World Youth Conference, Swami gave 5 discourses. That means He's talking to you. Gave every aspect of spirituality was given in that. But if one thing that stands out above all the things he said spirituality is so easy. It's very easy. People make it sound like a penance. He said, you do whatever you want to do in life, you do, he said. But do it to please God. Whatever you do, but do it to please God. That's enough. So that's my kind of mission statement. I try to endeavor. It's still a long way to go. And I'm very grateful to the organization that's given me various opportunities. Positions are temporary, they come and go, but it's a great privilege to be able to serve an organization founded by the Master himself. But that's not important. Whatever work that you do, I try not to separate spirituality and so-called office work and housework and things. Everything can be spiritualized. So the greatest message is to be an exemplar of the values He's asked us to be. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you very much,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Sarah.